I'm not hearing anyone. Is anyone hearing me?
We hear you, Lauren.
Okay, awesome. I was having some trouble with audio for a second there. Just giving a minute for anyone else to come in. All right, I think we're gonna get started, and if people join, they will join a little late. So everyone, welcome. This is another one of our series of workshops on the 2025 code package that's under review right now, set to go into effect March of next year. As a review of why we are here and how we got to this point, this is part of the Redmond 2050 process. Once every 10 years, we update our comprehensive plan and our long-range plan for the city. This 2025 code package is a result of that policy work and that plan. And what's in the 2025 code package is updates to our zoning. And zoning are the local laws and regulations that establish what type of activities and buildings can go in certain areas of the city. So what is in the 2025 code package? Our zones and uses package are under review, and we'll go over a timeline at the end. So package one, that's final zoning consolidations, our special districts and overlays. Package two is a lot of our housing, green building design standards, and our maps. That'll be going forward later. Just some of the things that are being restructured and some of the changes that are going through. So what you'll see is the yellow is edits in the 2025 code package are the ones that are being edited. And we're going to talk about our mixed use zones today. So neighborhood and mixed use zones. So this is the updated zoning map if you haven't seen this yet. So the areas we're going to be talking about today are mixed use zones. So all of the zones outside of the centers. So we've got our centers of Overlake, downtown, and Marymore, and we're talking about those mixed use zones outside of those areas. So the format of our zoning is going to stay similar, is going to be consistent. Where a lot of what we're doing is reformatting. So if you're familiar with some of the code review that you've seen previously, that have been moving previously through the process, this won't look terribly unfamiliar, but grouping for outside of the centers, our neighborhood zones, and then our citywide mixed use zones. So that it'll look similar in each chapter, from our centers to our mixed use zones to our neighborhood and residential zones. Each zoning chapter will have that purpose, the general info and references, the zones, any transition standards if applicable, development standards, street and public realm standards, and any zone specific regulations. Just some key definitions to review. When we refer to FAR, that's the floor area ratio. Base FAR, so that's a max allowed without the incentives. It's not a minimum. And transit-oriented development, TOD, is that kind of development around transit. So mixed-use zones. So these are new zones in the city. They're a transition from some of our existing zones. Neighborhood mixed-use zone, corridor mixed-use, and urban mixed-use. So this isn't our first time talking about this. We did have a workshop in June 2024 where we talked a lot about our urban mixed use zone and our neighborhood mixed use zones. So mixed use zones, simplifying our zones and standards. It's part of our, if you've been attending any of these, you notice simplifying and consolidation is a major theme in the work that we've been doing. The zones are being created to accommodate growth and allow some mix of residential and non-residential areas. Some of the changes that allow housing with our big box retail stores and adding commercial areas into residential zones. So our urban mixed use zone, it's formerly the regional retail area. So you see it highlighted right over here. So the idea of this zone is to have a broad mix of uses. So keeping and maintaining our big box style goods and retail, but also introducing more housing and creating more of a mixed use district. It's just a little zoomed in on where that is in the city and some examples of some kind of big box retail with housing. Just to review the purpose, the vibrant, walkable, economically robust area, proposing a building height between 60 and 85 feet and FAR between 4.5 and 6.5, depending on incentives, and kind of keeping that broad mix of goods. So I think I'll pause it there. I see a hand up and we can take questions on each district as we go through it and then have some time for questions at the end as well. So Tom, did you have a question?
Yes, and my apologies for joining the meeting a little late. I looked at the modeling that Ian shared with us in the work group. What was that last week? And I looked at the modeling related to the urban mixed use, and it showed that the under the proposed code changes, that the average cost per unit in urban mixed use would be $1.25 million in terms of construction cost. And, that would tell me that housing would not be feasible in urban mixed use because, right now the average, cost in Redmond for constructing an apartment unit is say in the, five to $600,000 range. And I'm just sort of wondering whether that what you're proposing in terms of residential in urban mixed use is gonna be proved feasible, and whether we're sort of like a dog chasing its tail right now in this discussion.
Well, I can't speak to that analysis right now, but I'm taking your question down, and there is also another housing workshop on Monday for further discussion on that analysis.
Okay, okay, because in looking at the analysis, again, it recognizes that there would be commercial mixed with residential. The only way to make residential work in the urban mixed use zone is to eliminate the commercial component associated with housing, which again, because that brings the cost per square foot down closer to a market rate. So again, it raises the whole feasibility issue. So I think it's worth examining more, uh, just to ensure that you get what you're trying to achieve here.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comment on urban mixed use? Okay. So another mixed use zone that's that we're looking at right now is our corridor mixed use. So these are formerly neighborhood. So right now, these areas are currently zoned as neighborhood commercial and general commercial districts, and we're these new districts will accommodate some modest growth and increase in density along our corridors. So as you see, they're sort of like those current districts of neighborhood and general commercial districts are sort of spread out throughout the city. Some of the parcels are really tiny. Some of them are a little bit larger. So accommodate some growth and mix along our corridors. They are throughout the city and it includes a number of those former districts, and the uses would be broad mix of uses with some increase in building height and increase in FAR. So that's a corridor mixed use. Right now, I'm just going to pull up the map. We have not added any districts to the corridor mixed use that weren't currently zoned, those previous zones. It's sort of just establishing this corridor district and then continuing a review as the years go on. Yes, Tom?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, and I apologize again. Again, looking at the analysis that was provided by Ian last week, in the corridor mixed use, the Arch analysis projects a cost per unit for residential unit for housing of almost $700,000 a unit, which, independent of all the other economic factors, just makes it infeasible, given, again, housing is running 5 to 600,000 right now. The only way, or in one case, I think they call it scenario two, where commercial is eliminated from a residential structure in the corridor, it drops the cost to closer to 500,000, which makes it feasible in the marketplace, again, given when economic conditions allow new development to occur. And so again, I would suggest trying to compare notes and look at that analysis to see again, whether what's being proposed is feasible in the corridors.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Any other questions or comments on the corridor mixed use? And just a reminder, there is another housing workshop on Monday, and you can send out the complete list at the end of this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Oja, do you want to take it away on talking about the neighborhood mixed use?
Sure, of course. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning to talk about mixed use. So the neighborhood mixed use zone is a new zone that we're implementing in the residential neighborhoods. So currently there is no commercial space allowed in our residential zones, and this is gonna trying to bring that small scale commercial space into our neighborhoods. So the building types, oh, and also the purpose is to implement the complete neighborhoods concepts. We did a lot of outreach last summer. We did an analysis with walk sheds and on currently what do we have in our neighborhoods, and you can go and look at that story map. The link is a little bit further down in the slides, but I can also put it in the chat. So based on that analysis, this is a proposal to implement this concept of having neighborhoods where you can just walk or take your bike and get most of your little need, like, I don't know, milk or eggs, stuff like that. And the building types are, it can be home businesses or small clusters, some micro retail. And the intent of this mixed use is to fit into the neighborhood. So the scale is small. It follows the same scale as the neighborhood residential zones zone. So it is basically very, very small. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we can, we have a list of candidate parcels after we did this analysis with the complete neighborhoods. Can you go to the next slide? I think. We, based on the complete neighborhoods analysis that we did with the walk sheds, and we identified areas where there was more need. And based on those areas, we chose some parcels based on several factors like access to services, connection to the neighborhood, walkability, access to transit. Also, that there was some activity density. When we were doing this outreach, we developed this game called Redmond. And we were asking the community what they wanted to see in their neighborhoods, and it was an interesting exercise. But something that came up frequently was that they wanted to see stuff around certain parks, like Grass Lawn came up several times, Idlewood Park, Hartman Park. So there was this comment on near schools, near parks, so near activity centers that are already having this walkability and people coming in and out. Can we go to the next slide, please? So based on that analysis, we first did a first pass and we got 73 parcels identified as candidates. Then we did some outreach. We sent targeted letters and had conversations, one-on-one calls and emails with the property owners. And from those conversations, we have ended up with 19 properties that are preliminarily identified as interested in this zone. And we are still working with them with the parcels and testing out the regulations. We go to the next slide. So I'm going to just show you some of the candidates that we identified. The gray are parcels that we reached out to, but they did not respond. The black are the ones that are not interested in this zone, and the red are the ones that are interested in this zone. So in this map, you can see this is Education Hill. We have 2 candidates. Oh, and another note, we also reached out to religious institutions because they have big parking lots that are unused most of the weekdays. So those could be potential sites that could accommodate this neighborhood zone, this neighborhood mixed use zone. So the first one, number 1, is purely residential structure in an actual neighborhood. It's smaller size, as you can see. The second one is on 166, and it's actually one of these religious institutions that is interested in implementing this concept. Can we go to the next slide? So this is a recently annexed area. The annexation area was 13 parcels. We annexed this from King County in July. And we've reached out to the neighbors to see if they were interested in this potential rezone. And 8 of these 13 parcels are from the same owner. So we've talked to them and they're potentially interested. Not all of the potential annexation area are on board, but a majority of them are. And also you see here, this is 132nd. It's near our Lake Washington Institute of Technology. There are several parks around, so that's why this area was chosen. We go to the next slide. In Grass Lawn, we identified several areas, specifically the ones in front of Grass Lawn. We reached out to them. Many were not interested. We had 2 parcels that were interested, but these are a specific case where there's an HOA, so they would have to all agree to come into the new zone, and that was not going to happen, so we dropped those 2 parcels. Can we go to the next slide? So this is the second area that we identified near Grass Lawn Park, and these 2 parcels that we see in red are from the same owner. The parcel in the middle in gray would have been also good to have included in this, but we reached out to the property owner 3 times and we have not heard back from them. This area number 3 is also kind of interesting, is on 60th Street and 156th Avenue. So it is in this corner. I don't know if you've seen it. It's near Bend Rush. So this area is also an older development. And we reached out to these property owners and we've heard back from 3 of them. And we are still having conversations with another property owner that is also kind of interested. So this is a kind of interesting area because of the near several parks, near the school. There's this bike trail around, so it is also a potential. We go, and this is the last slide on the candidates. These are 2 parcels in front of Idlewood Park. One of the 3rd parcel did not respond to our outreach, but these 2 are interested, but we still have to test out some of the regulations because of the unusual site. And there's a critical area in one of these parcels. So we are still working with the regulations to see if it will even work out for them. But this is also one of the sites that came up constantly when we were doing outreach in front of Idlewood Park. They would mention specific parcels like the triangle parcel. So this came up several times. And I think that's it for the neighborhood mixed use. I don't know if you have any question specifically on this smaller scale mixed use.
Are you allowing or creating a requirement for parking associated with the potential redevelopment of these sites for neighborhood mixed use?
Jeff, do you want to take this one?
Tom, I would like to look up the table before I answer the question. So let me get back to you in just a minute.
Okay.
Any other questions?
You know, I will just add a comment. You know, if the thought is to have a, you know, little neighborhood coffee shop as an example, you know, the viability of a business like that is related to volume and the ability to accommodate, you know, people who are, you know, just coffee on the way to work or on the way to run an errand will be pretty important. I know our experience with Starbucks, and I know that's a different business model, that if they have a drive-through, um, it can represent half the volume in a store. And indeed, it will often determine the viability of a location. So, you know, accommodating the ability of a business in this category to uh, you know, deal with what I'll call drive up. Not necessarily drive through, but drive up customers who pick up and go, whether it's, you know, a beverage or even food, will help determine whether this can be done in a viable way.
Thank
And
you.
for others interested, I just added in the chat that for most retail, no parking would be required in this setting, but would be allowed.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, I think we can go on. Yeah.
Yep. So here are the neighborhood and mixed use zone development standards. As we said, it would be consolidated into one table. We've got our neighborhood zones here, our neighborhood multifamily, neighborhood mixed use, our corridor mixed use, and our urban mixed use. So it sort of goes from least dense to the most density of outside the centers. Are there any questions on this? Comments? Okay. Oja, did you want to speak to any updates on the food truck pop-up retail courts that we've been discussing?
Well, just that we're gonna have this new pop-up retail courts where a cluster of food trucks can be installed or put in a parcel, and it would be a more, as I understand it, more permanent structure instead of just having them. Right now, I think they can be up to 2 to 3 hours in a certain spot, and this would give them a specific place where they can be for a longer period of time. It must meet the requirements for water, electric, restrooms, and ADA access, and of course, getting all the permits for a normal food truck.
And this is citywide, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You know, when I think about food trucks, I think about food trucks that serve an employment base. So these people are coming from a spot that, you know, has a restroom as an example. And, you know, if I'm not sure anyone's going to develop a retail court just for food trucks. And I'm sort of questioning the need for anything other than a space where they can operate a couple hours a day, in order to create something that's really viable and beneficial to the community. We have, I think about our shopping center or our office building. If a food truck could set up there for a couple hours a day, people who work in the buildings or shop at the center could, patronize the food truck, have access to the restroom facilities in either the office building or the various merchants at our center, or even just pick up something and take it to go back to their desk or back to their home. And I would just counsel you not to put so many requirements around this that it becomes unattractive and no one really wants to do it.
Thank you. Jeff just put in the chat the allowed uses chapter where you can go and see there's a whole table where you can see which uses are allowed, and you can check the food truck court specifically.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Something also just to be aware of is the Marymore TOD focus area. Some of the urban mixed use will fall into this district, so there is some overlap there. I think that's where you see in the development standards, in the final copy, it'll have that sort of the max you can do with the incentives in the Marymore TOD focus area.
Mm-hmm.
And so the timeline, just as an update, we did do a briefing at the Planning Commission last night. And we'll be going through Planning Commission. That's what PC is for these zones and the other design standards and building housing standards through the fall and winter.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, thank you. Is there any other questions on the mixed use zoning outside of our centers?
Mm-hmm.
One question from me. My name's George. Great presentation. Just want to be clear with the incentives-based height increases or FAR increase in FAR. What are those incentives other than affordable housing?
There's a number of categories. It's incentives, green building. Let me see if I can pull it up actually. We will be doing a workshop on Monday entirely on the incentives. So if you're able to attend that, we'll be able to go in a little bit more detail about what the categories are and how that's structured. It's similar if you've seen the Overlake incentive package. It's the same categories of that.
Okay, that's helpful.
But there's a number of categories, and it'll be a point-based system. So you do a little bit of from each category, and it's proportional. So more points you get, more FAR and height.
Okay.
But yeah, I think Jeff just put in the chat. We'll be discussing that more in depth on Monday at 10 a.m.
I also put in the chat our Redmond 2050 zoning consolidation story map. It does not include the neighborhood mixed use because those parcels are still under study, but there's an interactive map where you can go and click at the parcel and you would see what is the proposed zone that is happening with this Redmond 2050 project. So good information to know. Just go and play with the map, read about it, and yeah.
Yeah, you can spend a lot of time looking at that zoning consolidation map. It's a great resource.
Any other questions or comments?
If not, we just want to say thank you for attending this morning. We appreciate the comments and the feedback and the interest. And we hope to see you at other workshops in the coming weeks as we move through the 2025 code package.
I think there's someone typing in the chat.
No. Are there any other comments? I mean, feel free to speak out or put anything in the chat.
Thanks very much for the presentation.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
See you Monday.